everybody to get in. So a couple things. One, we'll roll through some general updates. There's a little small amount of COVID and then some AI. We'll finish up on the AI. There's not a ton of questions in today, so we'll go, as thoroughly and as quickly as possible. So one thing that I've gotten in, just FYI, a lot of people emailing me about not doing a general update every 2 weeks, even though it's requested every 2 weeks. It says, this is covered better, once a month or once a month or so. I don't disagree with that. Every 2 weeks for every single thing that we have going on is a bit much. So we will focus on things of significance, and general updates will be we'll go once a month or so. Okay. All right. So I want to start off with a big one. A lot of other questions coming in about the AGM. So AGM, yeah, we are planning an AGM. You guys will be notified and receive your packets when everything's approved and going out. So there have been a lot of questions about why there hasn't been an AGM yet. The answer is everybody's behind because of COVID, and that's not us. This is not a DM thing. The TSX filed extensions for, I don't know if it's every company they govern, but it's a lot of people. So they're running a bit behind, and extensions have been filed for everybody. As soon as we get, the go and packets and stuff will be released and sent out to everybody, and there will be a news release and everybody will know. We're not defaulted on anything or any of these properties. If we were, you would have seen it in the news. It's just, again, as with all things during the pandemic, we have to adjust a little bit. So as soon as we can, that'll be out. Okay, next questions. Got a lot of questions around the roll-up strategy. Okay, so I'm going to disclose what I can disclose here. And then further updates will be provided through the normal channels, press releases and such. Okay, so we do have an M&A team that does legwork and analyzes AI prospects, etc. Now, what we're looking for in general is, and I went over this one last week, so I'm going to briefly touch on it again for everybody that wasn't here. But we're looking for, in general, things that can, or companies that can, drop into what we're doing as far as the AI is concerned. So can we take, what they're doing and what we're doing and say 2 + 2 = 5, right? So if there's a good fit or, something like that, and we think that we can, make this work and make money off of it and share investor value, that's what we're looking for first and foremost. So the things that come to mind, when we're looking to these things right off the top of the head is stuff like NLP processing units. Okay. So that's what we do. So anybody that's got new and novel techniques or things like that, we can definitely take a look at that. Things that shore up different holes in our stacks that have been requested. So if there's anything that comes across the desk that, may shore up a shortcoming we have, things like that we'll look for. In addition to, profitability and such like that. So we definitely would give, preference to companies that are already generating revenue and such. But generally it's how do we, take that and basically realize future profit, revenue, et cetera, faster by acquiring the company as opposed to jumping in and building stuff ourselves. Okay. So that's the general strategy around that. Okay, somebody asked with a brief explanation of stack. Stack means, that's a technical term. That means the technologies and techniques that we use to produce software. For instance, just a very basic web stack, for instance, would be, say, Linux as an operating system, PHP as a programming language, and then say JSON for data transfer, JSON. So in layman's terms, it's the techniques and technologies that we're using to build things. Okay, institutional investor updates. I want to move on to that. We are continuing to meet with different institutional investors. We will be making our presence known, to them through varying degrees. We are meeting with them individually, and we are going to be, looking at conferences going forward, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that I'll be doing a lot of work with Andrew and Christina and the team that's been brought on to, help handle the IR/PR stuff. But yes, we will continue to engage with institutional investors. We will continue to market ourselves to institutional investors. And we will avail ourselves of all the channels that we can to, get the word out and, show people what DM is doing. Should we expect an increase in DM social media? Yes. We're actively looking at that now. That's one of the reasons, some of the hiring that's going on is to, look at the public relations and look at the IR. And so those things are being shored up as we speak. I'm not going to give you an exact date as to when more stuff's going to start coming out on social media, so I don't have an exact date, but it is in our near future. So that will, we'll be doing a much better job around that. Next question. So I've gotten quite a few questions around staff, and so I want to move on to that. So I'm going to cover a lot of staff questions in general and try to shore all of those up. So I want to repeat this. Number one, again, I will not give out personally identifiable information about staff, so please quit asking. So don't ask for their email addresses, don't ask for their phone numbers, contact information, etc. If you know our staff and they want to be contacted by you, they will give out their own contact information. That I cannot do. Now, the next thing, some people, additionally for staff, and I want to go over this, people are asking about the composition of the board of directors, and, et cetera. Any types of changes that go on with the board of directors or with, senior management and things like that are deemed material. So any and all information coming out about board of directors and staff, for instance, at that level, will be released through press releases and won't be talked about in here, as I can't. So now, one thing that I kind of missed, I want to backtrack from staff and go back to M&As. So people ask, what are the failure ratios? I.e., like how many, I guess the question is, and I'm going to answer this question, is like how many companies do we evaluate before it gets serious and goes into a news release? The real answer is a lot. Like we get a ton of companies on the table and most of them aren't messing with. Like most companies are failing, right? Like I think the statistics like 97% of new companies don't make it through the first year. So the vast majority of the companies that hit our desk or, come to our attention, probably not worth investing in, right? Or, merging or acquiring, et cetera. So they don't ever make it past that point. When stuff goes to a news release is when it's gotten serious, like when we've had to talk to the TSX about it. So if it becomes material, and that's, a book in and of itself. So that's when, we get dictated whether or not we go to news release, so it's LOI or this. What's generally going on in that time frame is we're looking at tech, we're looking at finances and, the fundamentals of the company, the staff, et cetera. What are we getting for our money? That's what's generally going on around that time frame. Okay. And then, we can, we'll discuss internally, decide how we want to proceed, whether that's, acquisition targets or, not looking at it or, etc. On the flip side, the TSX is doing their evaluation for, I guess, anti-fraud, antitrust, etc. I'm not exactly sure what goes on in that evaluation, as I'm not party to it, but I do know that it's pretty standard pretty standard for any type of M&A. The TSX has a procedure they follow to make sure that everything's on the up and up. All right. How does DM protect their patents? Through patent lawyers. So we file our patents, and then that's it. And then just in general, people have asked about what PRs are upcoming. Well, you'll have to wait and see. Like, I can't telegraph the PRs as that's telegraphing material information. So people ask, are PRs still progressing? Well, yes, and we continue to put them out. We put out another press release this morning that I'm going to touch on briefly here in just a second. And tangentially to staff, there have been questions around our vendors and things of this nature. I'm not going to go disclosing all our different vendors on here either. There's tons of vendors, like depending on what we're doing, whether it's, accounting vendors or technical vendors. There are a lot of companies we buy stuff from or, buy services from, whether that's, open market services, brokerage firms, tax firms, etc. I mean, guys, if you want to know exactly which firms we're using and you need it for a business reason, I'll be glad. But to contact me directly, I can put you in touch with a firm, or if you need help, I don't mind helping you out. But I'm not going to go through the whole list of vendors on here. It's too much. Now, about the last thing in the general, and then I'm going to save the tier 2 to tier 1 piece for its own section. So do we use consultants to look at different verticals? Yes. In fact, that's how we've landed in the verticals we were in. We grabbed people from the industry who'd been in those industries for decades, and that's one of the ways that we make inroads into new verticals. Okay. COVID. I'm going to do COVID quickly, and then there's not a lot on AI. I'll do that quickly, and then we'll talk about today's news release. There's a lot of questions around that. So, people have heard that there may be a new union agreement coming out on February 13th. That's possible. Are there changes? We don't know yet. So we don't know what the contents of that's going to be yet. So we will wait and see what comes out, and when it does, if there's material impact on the business, everybody will know. But right now, we don't have the details of the agreement between the production companies and the unions. That said, we have not been informed by any union or production company that there's any significant change coming down the pipe. So nobody's told us that there's anything significant coming down the pipe yet. Just to put that in perspective, those unions and Screen Actors Guild, et cetera, these guys have been negotiating since last June, something like that, July. So this is ongoing. It's not anything new. And it will continue to be ongoing as long as the pandemic is here. All right. AI. Do you have any plans to we're going to move on to AI now. People have asked about quantum computing. We would leverage quantum computing if it when it becomes available and it becomes feasible to leverage that. That being said, no, we're not going to be involved in the building blocks. Like, we're not going to produce a quantum computer. That's beyond the scope of anything remotely of what DM could do. We'll have to leave that to, Intel and Chinese, governments of the world, stuff like that, people that are working on it now. So, and then, do you have timelines on material releases about the government contract? No. The government contract is the same as it is with all the other government pieces. When it becomes available, we will let you know. Until that time, we don't know. Like, again, this is the same as dealing with any other government entity. There's not a lot of information given there, but as soon as we're allowed to release information around that, we will let you know. That will probably come in the form of a press release, as it'll be material. Has the winning the government contract opened any doors or produced for potential clients and stuff, et cetera? Yes, absolutely. And we will go into more details of those when they do become material. But yeah, it opened a lot of doors, and it opened up a lot of, there's a lot of people who noticed. So that's a good thing. Okay. Now, so the last thing I want to touch on here is the press release this morning and moving from tier 1 to tier 2. So I'm going to have, if you guys, the moderators, could end up an advanced company requirement from the TSX V for now on this channel, that would help. If we could just put that as a pin, that would be great. Now, what they are going to do, yeah. So that's a perfect explanation from Investopedia. In a nutshell, what this means is we're no longer a startup in so many words. So to move up to tier 1, we have to have a better established and more well-financed company. In general, we get access to a better regulatory group. Our filing requirements have been reduced. Like, we're not going to have to jump through quite as many hoops as we used to. Now, this should open up access, increased access to institutional investors. That's another advantage of being on a tier 1 company. But in general, this is a signal to the market that, we have graduated. We have, either, significant financial assets. We've got a proven track record. At least the TSX, has deemed us to have a proven track record. And we're not running around trying to raise money all the time in order to keep the doors open. We have to prove to them that we have enough money to run the business for the next 18 months or so. No matter what. Like, if nothing else happened, we have to prove to them we've got enough resources to do that. So that's what it means from 1,000-kilometer view to move up to the tier 1 status. That, was disclosed in the news release today. Now, I encourage all of you to go read the article on Investopedia. That gives you another great overview of that. I asked the mods to pin it, so it should be there. If there's any other questions around it, please, send them in, and we'll be glad to, answer them. Now, so I think that's it for what we had coming in today. Oh, last one. The possibilities were endless was mentioned as a great catchphrase. Can you give us another great catchphrase? Right off the top of my head, put me on the spot. No, that one's good. I like the possibilities are endless. But for this conversation, let's say keep your ears open because there's a lot more coming. All right, guys. So I think that's pretty much it on what we can touch on in here today. Thank you all for your attention and for showing up, and we'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody.